Welcome to Lesson 136, Comparing and Ordering Decimals and Fractions. Today we're going to talk about how to compare fractions and decimals, and then how to use those comparisons to order fractions and decimals. Alright, so one of the first things that we need to do when we're looking at all these numbers is we need to think about if we're comparing two things, you can't compare an apple to an orange and try and find the best apple. So if you're looking to buy the best apple, you need to compare apples to apples. It's the same idea when you're converting or when you are working with decimals and fractions. So here I have 1 35 hundredths, 9 hundredths, 1 half, 4 tenths, and 4 25ths. Now right now I can't compare these the way that they are because I have 3 fractions and 3 decimals. I need to either make them all fractions or make them all decimals. Now the thing is, if I make them all fractions, they all have to have the same denominator. If I make them all decimals, I have to change the denominators in order to make them into decimals. So either way, you're going to be doing a little bit of work here. Right? I ask that you try both ways and pick which one you like the best for when you are comparing and ordering the fractions and decimals. However, remember when you write them in their order, when you group or order them from least to greatest or greatest to least, you do need to write them in their original form. So you'll see this in your notes, and I gave you a little bit of space here to show some of your work. And then if you want to just put a line down at the bottom, right down here, to show that this is probably where you should be writing your answer in. So you know up here you have the space to work. And for this one, we're going to put them in order from least to greatest. So in this case, I'm looking at my denominators and I have 2, 10, and 25. I know that all of those can easily be made into decimals, so I'm going to choose to make these fractions into decimals. That way I don't have to change these numbers. So I know that 1 half I want to change to have a denominator of 10. And the reason that I want it to change to have a denominator of 10 is because we have a tenths place for decimals. So if I take 2 and I multiply it by 5 and multiply the top by 5, I get 5 tenths. So as a decimal, I know that 1 half is equal to 5 tenths. 4 tenths, I don't have to change, which is nice. I just know that it has to end in the tenths place. So I put my 4 in the tenths place and I have nothing in front of it. And then I have 4 25ths. 4 25ths. Well, if I look at the 25, I have to think of what number that can be multiplied to that is a power of 10. So can it be multiplied to 10, 100, 1000, so on and so forth. And I know that 25 can be multiplied to make 100. And I multiply that by 4 for that to happen. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. Because remember, first we're making an equivalent fraction. Now I can take this fraction, which is 16 hundredths, and I can turn it into a decimal. And as a decimal, 4 25ths is 0 and 16 hundredths. So now I can compare all of these together because they are all decimals. But when I write them in order from least to greatest, I need to make sure that they are in their original form. So I have to look and I have to think of what is my smallest number. So I can actually off to the side list my numbers. I have 1, I have 0 and 35 hundredths, 0 and 9 hundredths, 0 and 5 tenths because 1 half changed to 0 and 5 tenths, 4 tenths changed to 0 and 4 tenths as a decimal, and 4 25ths changed to 0 and 16 hundredths. Now in order to compare these the best way possible, I have to fill in my missing numbers with zeros, just like when I add decimals. And now I'm going to look down the columns. I'm first looking for the smallest number. Well, I know that 1 can't be it because 1 is the only whole number. So in this case, I have to go to the next column, and I have 3, 0, 5, 4, and 1. Since this number right here has a 0 in the tenths place, it is going to be my smallest number because no other number has a 0 in the tenths place. So in that case, my first smallest number is 0 and 9 tenths. It is actually that decimal, so I don't have to change it back to a fraction. Okay, now I can look again, and I have 3, since they're still all different, I can look at 3, 5, 4, and 1. In this case, 1 is the smallest number out of those. Therefore, 0 and 16 hundredths will be my next smallest. However, 0 and 16 hundredths is actually the 4 25ths. So that will be my next number. And remember, when we're writing a list, we put a semicolon in there. And then now I can look in this row again, and I have 3, 5, and 4. In this case, the 35 hundredths is going to be the next smallest, and that one is written as a decimal for us, so we don't have to change it. Okay, and then I can cross that one out, and I can look again, and I realize that I have 5 and 4, so 4 tenths is going to be my next smallest, which is actually written as a fraction, so I have to change that back to fraction form. And then my next smallest has to be the 5 tenths, or the 1/2, as it is written in our original form, because that is the only number left that is not a whole number. And then last but not least will be my 1 whole. Hey, what might help us is if we remember that any number that is a fraction or a decimal is less than 1. So these numbers in here are all between 0 and 1. So if you see 3.5, that means that it's between 3 and 4. There are numbers that are between our whole numbers. Those are the numbers that are mixed numbers and decimals. Right, so again, you should have that listed right here. And the next thing that I would like you to do, you have these down here, I would like you to pause, try these on your own, and when you come back, we'll go over your answers. All right, so for this one, it says that we are going greatest to least. You see it right here. So if we're going greatest to least, and I realize that I have fractions and decimals here, so I'm going to have to change them. Whoop. Sorry about that. Keep the numbers bundled so they don't disappear on us. All right, let's try that again. Bring these all up here. Since they are all different fractions and decimals, I am going to look at my denominators. The denominators in this case are 25 and 50, all of which can be changed to decimals easily, so I'm going to change them to decimals instead. Okay, and I know that 11/20ths, if I multiply them by 5 on top and bottom, gives me 55 hundredths, so 55 hundredths. 3/5 can be changed to tenths, so it's going to be 0 and 6 tenths. And then 3/50ths can be changed to 100 by multiplying both the top and the bottom by 2, and I get 6 hundredths, which I know is 0.06. So now I'm going greatest to least. Okay, and I believe we have all the right numbers here. Yes, so first I have to take a look, and I'm going to list my numbers again. I have 9 thousandths, 0 and 67 hundredths, 0 and 3 hundredths, 0 and 55 hundredths. So remember, I'm adding on those zeros to make it easier to compare the numbers. All right, so I'm looking for the biggest number first. Well, nothing helps me in this column because none of these are whole numbers. It's all just 0. Then I have to look for the biggest number in here, and in this case I have 2 6s, so I have this one and this one. So now I need to go to the next column, and I can rewrite it again if it makes it easier. Now here I see that the 7 is bigger than the 0, so 0 and 67 hundredths, which is the way my number was originally written, is my biggest number. Okay, so that goes first. And then I know that my next biggest number has to be the 0 and 6/10, okay, which in this case was actually 3/5 as a fraction. Right, so now I can go ahead and I can cross out these two. And now I have to look here again because I'm not done. I have 0, 0, 5, and 0. Well, that makes it nice and easy on me because I know that this number has to go next. Originally it was written as 0 and 55/100ths, but it was actually first written as 11/20ths, so that would be my next number in the sequence. All right, so then now I can cross that one out, and now I have 0, 0, and 0. So now I have to go to the next column and cross all these out, and I have 0, 3, and 6. Well, I know that 6 is the biggest out of all of these, so I have to look for the number that had 0.06, and that in this case was right here, but originally it was written as 3/50ths, so I put the 3/50ths in my sequence. I don't write the decimal, I write whatever the original number was. Okay, and then I have the 3 in the hundredths place and a 0 here, so I know that my 0 and 3/100ths is next. And then I have no other choices. I know that 0 and 9/1000ths has to go last. Again, make sure between each of your numbers you have a semicolon. Don't just put a comma because that makes it look like one big number. All right, so what makes this a little bit more complicated when you are working with fractions and decimals is when you turn these numbers into mixed numbers. So again, you have plenty of space in your notes to look at this. Okay. I don't know where that came from. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to do the same thing you always did. You'll notice that you have fractions and decimals here, and you need to decide if you want to change the fractions to decimals or the decimals to fractions. In this case, again, my denominators show me that it's easier to change the fraction to a decimal because the denominators are nice and easy to work with. Okay, so in this case, and I'm just going to do this quickly, I know 11/20ths is going to give me 55/100ths because I multiply by 5 on top and on bottom. But now it's not just 55/100ths, it's 1 and 55/100ths because I have this 1 in front. My 3/5ths, if I remember from before, I can multiply them both by 2 and I get 6/10ths. But again, this is 2 and 6/10ths, and I want to write it as a decimal. And then my 3/50ths was actually 6/100ths because I multiplied them both by 2. But this is 1 and 6/100ths. Okay, so we're doing the exact same thing as we did before. However, now we have the whole number in front of the fraction. Just remember the whole number is just like this and this. They are both exactly the same. It's just this is separated by a decimal and has decimals after, and this one is not separated by anything and has a fraction after it. Okay, again, we're going to go greatest to least. So I am going to go ahead and compare and see. I have 1, 1, 0. That's not going to be an option just yet. And 1, 2, 1. Well, 2 is definitely my biggest number. So again, you can, if you want to, write it down the side. 1 and 67/100ths, 0 and 89/100ths. And it's good if you practice how to say them because it makes it easier when you're converting. So 2 and 6/10ths. And 1 and 6/100ths. In this case, I'm not going to bother changing that at all since it is the biggest number as it has a 2 for the whole number and everything else has 1. But because it was written as a fraction first, that's what I need to put in my sequence. So I am going to put 2 and 3/5 first as that will be my biggest number. then all the rest of these have 1 except for 0 and 8900. So I actually know that this is going to go last because it has the smallest whole number. So if I want to, I can put it at the end already. That might be hard when you're writing though, because you might not be able to squeeze the numbers in. So be careful if you do that. You might end up doing some erasing. Okay, so then I know that I have to look at the next column, okay, because this isn't going to help me anymore. And I have 0, 6, 5, and 0. Well, 6 is the biggest number out of all of those. So whatever number had the 67 hundredths, which in this case was the 1 in 67 hundredths, that is going to be our next largest number. Okay, and then the next biggest number, I have 0, 5, and 0. So again, whatever had the 55 hundredths, in this case, here's the 55 hundredths, but the number was written as a fraction first, so we write it as a fraction in our sequence. Okay, and that takes me out of the tenths place because now I have 0 and 0. So I have to go to the next place value, which is the hundredths, and I have a 6 and I have a 9. Well, the 6 is smaller than the 9, so I have to find which number, because I'm done with this one and I'm done with this one. This one had the 9, this one had the 6, but originally it was written as a fraction. See how it's nice to put the number up on top just in case you forget what you converted it to or what it started as. Now I can see that I had to convert 1 in 3/50ths to 1 in 600ths. That goes next in my sequence. And then since I know 0 and 89 hundredths is last, I know that 1 in 9 hundredths has to go next. Okay, so the whole number really doesn't change anything. It just gives us another column to look at. In this case, we have to be careful because we're looking at whole numbers and we ended up having a 2 here and not all of the first numbers were the same. So make sure to check that whole number first. All right, so you have one more set of problems here that I would like you to go ahead and try on your own. And when you come back, we will go over your answers. Okay, again, you're going from least to greatest. I know I keep switching it on you, but I want you to practice and make sure that you're reading the directions. In this case, I'm actually going to change the decimals just to show you. I know that I made nice, easy fractions here, but I just want to make sure that I give you an option and show you how to change the decimals just in case. So in this case, I have 3 as my whole number and 91 over 100. I have 3 and 97 over 1,000. And then I have 89 over 100. I have 3 and 3/10. But now here's the problem. The problem in this case is all of these numbers don't have the same denominator. So to do this, I have to change all the denominators and make them the same. So in this case, I'm just going to make them all 1,000. Okay, so I would get 3 that stays the same, and I have to multiply this by 10. So I multiply this by 10, and I get 910 thousandths. And then here I can leave it the way that it is because it's already 1,000. Here I have to multiply by 10 because it's not 1,000, so I have 890 1,000ths. Here it's a 10, so I'm actually going to multiply it by 100 in order to make it into 1,000. So I get 3 and 300 thousandths. Now 25 is a little bit more difficult, so I take 3 and 15 25ths, and I'm going to first change that to 100. So I'm going to multiply it by 4 and by 4, and I get 3 and 60 100ths. And then I can multiply both of those by 10 to make them into thousandths. And I get 3 and 600 1,000ths. And then I'm going to do the same with 3 and 2/20ths. I'm going to multiply them both by 5. And I'm going to get 3 and 10 100ths. And then I'm going to multiply both of these by 10. And I will get 3 and 100 1,000ths. And now I can compare them from least to greatest, first looking at their whole number. In this case, this is the only one that does not have a whole number. So I will list this one first. So 0 and 89 hundredths, which was written as 891 thousandths. So now we're looking at the fractions, which makes it a little bit more difficult. Right, and then now all the rest of them have 3's in the front. So now I have to look at the numerators to look at which one's the smallest. In this case, I have 910, 97, 300, 600, and 100. So 97 is going to be the smallest out of those. But originally it was written as 3 and 997 thousandths. So that will go next. Again, I go through the numerators. I see 910, 300, 600, and 100. 100 being the smallest, but originally it was written as 3 and 2/20ths, so that would go next. Okay. And now I look at the numerators again. I have 600, 300, 910, 300 being the smallest. Originally it was written as 3 and 3/10ths, so that's how I have to write it in my sequence. And then I have 3 and 910 thousandths left and 3 and 600 thousandths left. So I have the 600 would go first, which originally was written as 3 and 15/25ths. And last but not least, we have the 3 and 91 hundredths. Okay, so there's a lot of work that goes along with this, as you have to make sure that you are comparing apples to apples, and you have to change fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. When you see problems like this where you have 1 and 2/3, you're going to want to change that to a decimal, because it's easier to change this to a decimal than it is to change this to a fraction and then make a common denominator. So you have a couple of problems on here for your Edmodo quiz for tonight. And if you have any questions, I want you to make sure to post them to Edmodo so we can go over them in class.